All right, I've been putting this job off for a little while just because it's one of those jobs where you know it's a multi-step thing and sometimes it's just not the fun part. Basically what's happened with this, if you watch my two other videos, is I made an attempt to try and repair the leak at this part here. As somebody mentioned in the comments, it is a bad design. What ends up happening is that this tube here, this kind of 3x5 tube down here, ends up being the reservoir for all the hydraulic fluid. But the designers thought that it would be all right to just put a sleeve in there and run the pin for the arm straight through it. Now, this part is hollow, along with that sleeve that goes in there. So what happens is, because I'm rough with my equipment, stuff gets beaten up, so it ends up twisting and tearing on this part here and then eventually cracks. Now in the previous videos I did weld it twice, but they never held because what ends up happening is that the welds get contaminated. Generally and overall, this is just a bad design, and I'm going to try and fix this problem. And I'm going to do that, as you can tell, by adding this 5-gallon reservoir tank, and I have to figure out how to mount that somewhere over here. I've already taken a few things off just because I wanted to check what parts I needed. I still need to get those, hopefully sooner than later, but it was just to get them out of the way to kind of figure out what I could do. Because it's such a small unit, there's limited space. I didn't want to rotate the engine around or do something there and have something sticking out and having a vibrating or unbalanced point right over here. So the only thing is to put it somewhere within this area here. I was thinking of just hanging it out over the edge here, but this pin right here needs to come out, and I can't block that because it ends up being able to remove or install the legs. So the only place that I have is right under here. Now that's going to require a lot of cutting to get through that. And then I'm going to have to try and stabilize it here just to take some of the weight from the seat. It shouldn't be too bad, but it's just going to be time consuming. So with that, I'm going to take a couple measurements and start making a cut. All right, so I got my measurements, and the plan is to try and keep the tank as far forward as possible, giving more room for the pump over here. And what it'll also do is it'll allow me to put some braces here all the way down to try and alleviate any of the flex that might happen from the seat. Now, in my measurements, I added about a 1/4 inch to the top, just to give it a little bit of leeway, just in case it decides to vibrate or break loose, whatever might happen. Just a little air gap, so to speak. So let's get to cutting. Well, there's no going back now. So I pretty much cleaned everything out. It took me about a half hour to grind all that stuff, especially down here, because it was about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch around here because I couldn't get the blade in. I also went and removed these bungs. There's another one on the other side here that was originally for the filler neck. Removed that, cleaned that up. I'll be plugging those because I just don't want stuff to get in there and then start filling it up and overweighting it, dirt and stuff, you know, the kind of stuff you get when you start digging. And here it is with the tank kind of placed in its position. There's a couple of things I noticed that I might have to do something with at some point. Now the tank is sitting a little bit lower than where I would like, just because of the way these flanges are made. This is a little bit lower than the actual tank. But the thing that concerns me is this filler neck. I might do some kind of tube or something like that comes out and makes it easier to fill. The thing that concerns me the most is just because this thing, I lean it forward a lot, and I'm pretty sure that the fluid is just gonna flow through there and burn my leg. Another little thing I noticed is that this is the pressurized side, and the length is not going to be long enough to reach all the way over here. I might have to extend it a few inches, well, several inches actually, to get it to fit properly. But I'll play around with that to see exactly what I might need. But so far I'm happy with the progress. And I'm surprised it didn't fight me as much as I was thinking. So the next step is actually just going to be to build out the brackets from the main frame down to the tie-down brackets. and hopefully that's not going to be too bad. I got some angle iron that should fit in there and be able to make kind of a square with it. And then I also want to just make a little bit of a couple support brackets from here to down here to make sure that that doesn't flex too much. I kind of pushed on it before and it seemed to be okay. I mean, honestly, I might not even have to really do anything, but it's just a precaution just to make sure everything is good. So let's move on to making those brackets. Well, as the saying goes, several days later. So due to the chaotic nature of my welding and position that I'm in to get this put back together, I just went ahead and cut all the pieces and welded everything on there. It's a simple process, but just very time consuming. It took me maybe, I don't know, an afternoon. Maybe not that much, but close enough to say that it was. Now, as you can tell, everything is perfectly straight and lined up. Everything's been grinded, smoothed out as best as I could. You know, for a flux core welder, I think I did all right. Some of these welds aren't that great. I ended up having it too hot when I was welding these parts and it kind of burned through in some areas. But you know what, it'll do. I think I had mentioned that I was going to plug these up, but it just ended up being a pain, so I didn't even bother. At this point, it just doesn't matter. I want to get this done. It's not one of my most favorite things to do is this kind of stuff here. Although it's not bad, but you know, just a pain in the butt. Now I have the filter up here. It's kind of screwed in, but it's going to end up changing because it was very difficult to get some of the fittings to be able to get this to a hose, like a barb fitting or thread in or just something. Anyway, I figured something out and that's what I'm going to use. But after I painted and pop in the tank and make sure that that's situated, I will deal with that and I'll bring you in at that point. The only weak point that I can see in all of this is probably this here, because I can flex it. Well, maybe on a good day I can flex it. So I may at some point have to put something across here. But I think for now it should be all right. I'll test it out and see what the vibrations are like. But as for the base, it's pretty darn good, pretty solid. It's really not going to go anywhere. And all these pieces of metal, they're just scrap pieces that I found off of some weird transportation frame when at this place I used to work at. But they've held up. I put my weight on there and it held, so I'm not even going to stress about that. So let me get to painting this and popping the tank in. All right, so before painting, all I did was just clean it with some brake clean. That's pretty much as far as I'm going to go with that. The paint that I'm using is just a red trim-clad farm and implement, something really basic, not too expensive. This is just a tool. It's not something that needs to be fancy anyway. Well, here we go. It's all painted red. Looks good. It's definitely glossier than the original, but that's fine. It's not a perfect job, but you know what? It covered everything that it needed to cover. And there's a few drips here and there. Granted, now they're a little hard to see because they've kind of thinned out a little bit, but you know, I'm pretty happy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to install the tank, get that bolted down, and do all the other stuff that needs to be done with the tank, and then I'll bring you back then. So I've kind of run into a little bit of a problem with this filter. It used to be down here behind, well, this now bracket, and because of the job that I did, I kind of had to relocate it. I originally wanted to put it up here. I mean, as you can see, I drilled the little holes for it and was going to have it positioned there, but I've been having such a hard time finding the connectors or couplers to be able to do that, so I've kind of resorted to just putting it here. But as you can see, there's the big problem. It is pretty much where I normally put my leg. Sometimes I put it up here to get an extra position, which would be fine, but sometimes it's here. Now I know that screwing that in will get it in a little bit smaller or shorter, I should say, but man, I'm kind of limited here. I may slightly put it at an angle, put the filter at an angle, lower this a little bit more, and see if that helps. But it's hard to tell. It's just one of these things that you don't know until you actually have it up and running and testing, right? But either way, I will have to live with that. Let me get this all tightened up and buttoned down and then see what we have from there. All right, first things first, the elephant in the room. It's going to be funny. I mean, you're looking at it right now. I don't have this connector. Nope. I tried finding it. I'm going to have to go to a couple other cities that are about an hour out from where I am to see what they have in the hydraulic stores there, and hopefully I can find something. I really did not expect this project to be this tedious and annoying. I've literally been playing with this thing for a week and a half now, trying to get it to where it is. But in any case, I gotta live with it. Time is short though. I can't fix it in this video, but what I'll do is I'll do kind of a little quick update on where this is. It's just a really short video. Anyway, as you can tell, I put the new filter on because I butchered the old one to try and take it off. And also, if you notice, there's this cool little switch. I really like these switches. This is just an ignition cutoff. So while you're running and you don't want to get off the unit, you can actually shut it off. It basically grounds one of the power wires from the ignition, cutting the engine. Super simple. I like it. I really like these switches. I think I mentioned it before. I was able to reuse the return hose from the levers. I also had to get a new pressurized hose for this one. The original was too short to go back to the pump, or I should say from the pump. I also put the seat back on. And the engine was loose, so I ended up tightening that up too. Just a little bit of maintenance things, just to try and keep this thing up and running. I really was hoping to get this running and done and over with in this video, but obviously it's just running out of time and trying to find parts. I think it's kind of the motto for this channel at this point is just find parts, find parts, find parts. Oh, almost forgot to mention, I was going to put this filler neck on the other side, but because I knew that I was going to tilt forward a lot, just because of the type of work that I do, sometimes ends up being in like a little bit of a pit. I ended up switching the inlet or the fill opening to this side, so that way it would be more on the high side. Now I do have a funnel that I use to fill this, so it should be okay. I did do a little bit of a test fit, and it should go in there without any issue. I know that I kind of went a little bit quick on some of this stuff, but I was limited on time, daylight, and just access to being able to do this work. But I hope it wasn't too bad and that you kind of got an idea of what I had to go through. But we've gotten to that point, and this is where I'm going to leave it as is. Like I mentioned, I'll do that quick little update on this unit so that way you know where it's at and if it's done or when it's done. So thanks for watching, and take it easy.